If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Music, and many more major podcast platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
With the 14th pick in the 2019 NBA Draft, the Boston Celtics select Romeo Langford, Grant Williams,
Carson Edwards, Tremont Waters,
Vincent Poirier,
Javante Green,
Robert Williams III,
Jimmy Ojale,
Brad Wanamaker, Daniel Tice,
Ennis Cantor,
Taco Fall,
Marcus Smart,
Gordon Hayward,
Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker from the University of Connecticut.
You don't like NBA basketball!
And we are back with another episode of From the Rafters. Sam and I are here with another great guest. We have Max Lederman from NBC Sports Boston. How you doing today, Max?
I'm doing great, guys. How about you? We got some playoff basketball.
Oh yeah, I'm more than excited.
This is the most fun I've had in a long time. Like, it's getting to the point where, like, usually when the playoffs are on, like, I'm nervous for the game, but now I'm just getting excited for the games.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
this is not a nervous time.
No,
which is
there's
great.
literally nothing you need to be nervous about.
Oh man. So since the last time you've been on the show, Max, we've kind of changed things up. So instead of getting right into it, we're gonna ask you just a quick question just to, lighten things up a little bit. So Max, are you a Netflix guy? Do you watch Netflix at all?
I do watch Netflix.
So I want to know, what is your favorite Netflix show of all time, or just the one you're liking right now?
Oh man, of all time, I'd have to really think. Me and my daughters are watching Airbender, which is pretty
Yep.
good. I'm really liking that. That was an era of Nickelodeon that I just missed. I didn't have cable when I was younger, and by the time that show came out, I was too old to be watching cartoons. Even though it's got some adult themes and
Yeah.
it's fun. I like it, but I also just watched Umbrella Academy, which I really liked. I was like really bored, and after one of the late basketball games, and I couldn't fall asleep. So I was like, let me just see what's on. And Netflix did a good job of promoting it. It was the first thing I saw on my screen, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot. And I really liked it. I recommend it. Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, I've seen the first season. I need to get caught up though because I have not watched season 2 yet. But season 1 was awesome. I loved what I saw. So,
Yeah, season 2 is good as well.
Sam, what's your favorite Netflix show if you're a Netflix guy?
There's like a couple. I really like Dexter.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't know if you guys have seen Dexter.
Yes,
Dexter's really
yes.
good. What else? I mean, I'd like shows that aren't on Netflix. Like Curb Your Enthusiasm is probably my favorite show.
Yep.
It's hilarious. So that's probably my two answers. I'm
I
also
gotcha.
watching Atlanta right now, which is pretty funny, but that's on Hulu.
Okay,
So I give you the 3 streaming services.
I gotcha. I'm a big Criminal Minds guy myself. I'd have to say that's my favorite of all time. During quarantine, I watched Outer Banks. I fell into the hype. It was pretty good though, so can't complain there. But yeah.
Can I give you
overall-
guys a quick company pitch here? Check out Peacock.
Really?
Saved by the Bell is free on Peacock. You don't have to pay for everything. So like it's like a tiered service. So like there's stuff that's available to anyone. You just got to sign up. You can do it if you still have cable through your cable box, which is what I did. And then you can watch Saved by the Bell, which I don't know. You guys are definitely way too young to have watched it, but it was incredibly important in my I was way too young to be watching that show when it was on. But I mean, it was a kid. It's a fine show, but it really it really kind of molded me into a Zach Morris wannabe, where I was always trying to scheme in school and get away with it, and
Yeah.
yeah, I pretty much did. It was all harmless stuff, but it's a great, great, great show. You should watch it.
I've seen ads for Peacock everywhere. I've been considering it, but maybe I'll have to pull the trigger now that you say that. It's all over YouTube, and they're doing a lot of advertising for it. So
We
Yeah,
put
we
it in
always
our
see it
pre
during
and post
games.
game show. Yep.
yeah,
Scal does a read during the show, and I put it in our pregame show every show. So it's working.
yeah, I know for sure it's everywhere. I've definitely seen it. Maybe I'll have to invest now. But Sam figured, and I agreed that you'd be a great guest to have on, considering the current series. Because Max, you grew up a Sixers fan, right? And you still are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Unfortunately,
Sorry.
it
so
wasn't a choice.
yeah. My first question to you today is: are the Sixers done? Is this over?
Yeah, I mean, look, would I be surprised if they won one game?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'd still probably be pretty surprised. But I could see it happening. I would think maybe it would have to happen today if the Celtics kind of, we're reading the press clippings and the Sixers just try to, you know, play the underdog role. But the problem is just the Celtics are better. And I would have picked the Celtics to win the series even if Ben Simmons was healthy. But as soon as he got hurt, I think we all were just like, yeah, the Sixers don't have a chance. And unfortunately, I think for Philly fans is that the Sixers also took that mentality, like we don't have a chance. And I give Embiid a ton of credit. He's playing his ass off, and it's just not enough. And you can see when and I kind of had this theory going into the series, like unless they got a game or two early, they would just kind of throw in the towel. And that's kind of how the games have gone too, where they've started out okay, but then as soon as like it's a double digit deficit or the Celtics start to really play well, the Sixers kind of just give up. And I can't really blame them for it, because at the end of the day, it's like, in the grand scheme of things, they can't in their souls believe that they have a chance to win a championship this year. So when you're, doing the best you can, playing great defense, and, your opponent's still, Jason Tatum's just still doing absurdly disgusting things with the ball and shooting and making great shots, it's deflating. It's like a Tim Thomas save. It really is. Some of Tatum's sidestep threes are like Tim Thomas just demoralizing the opponent with an absurd save. And I think the Sixers they just don't have enough fight. And I'm not really even being critical about that. I think it's just I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned that they feel like they can't win a championship. Couldn't you say the same thing about the Celtics of 2 years ago when they went on that? They almost made it to the finals. Like, why do you think there's difference in mentality there?
The Celtics were young and dumb. They didn't know what they didn't know, and they were playing well, and they were beating teams, and they won. And they lucked out by catching the Bucks when Giannis was not ready to be to impact winning. He was starting to ascend into the great player that he is, but he wasn't impacting winning yet. And the team wasn't built perfectly yet, and they weren't coached by Bud yet. And then, and still that was a 7-game series. And Brad really, I think, grew that series as well. And then they got Philly, which I got crushed, because I was like, man, it's a shame that the Celtics run's going to end, because, Philly's just, I watched, every single Celtics game, and, probably 30 or 40 Sixers games that year. And I was like, there's just no way that the Celtics can beat them without Kyrie and Hayward. And I was so wrong. But it was also like I know Dario Saric in that series gave them like a weird quote at the end where he's like, if we didn't go down 3-1, this would have been a series. And everyone was like, yeah, duh. But I understand what he meant. Like, there were like moments in each game where it really did like kind of tilt the entire series, where if it just went the other way, it would have been a lot tighter. But I blame coaching a lot for that. And JJ Redick made some really uncharacteristic, boneheaded turnovers. I can't remember which game it was. I think it was game 3 or 2. But it they lucked out a little bit in that regard, where they had the Sixers in their first go at it in the playoffs with that core, and Brett Brown's a terrible coach. And then the Cavs were just doing their thing, where they were just kind of coasting to the finals like they did every year with LeBron back. And I still can't believe the Celtics lost that game 7 at home. But
Me neither.
I just think the difference is they had an easier path. They didn't have a team like the Celtics in the first round, but they also were just young and naive, and clearly had two great players that were just, one was a rookie and one was a second year guy, Jaylen and Jason, who had that core DNA of just elite playoff performers, and they've really shown it in these last couple seasons.
Yeah, I think a big thing I think you kind of glazed over, or not glazed over, but you didn't say it outright, but kind of thought it, is that the Celtics just looked like they wanted to win. Meanwhile, the Sixers this year are kind of like, yeah, we'll try, but like, I don't know, we're the 6th seed. Simmons is hurt. Like maybe it's
And
not
no,
our
and
year.
Simmons, and think about it too. Simmons got hurt just like last week or whatever it was, or a week and a half ago. Even though like originally he was supposed to miss the playoffs with that back injury, but then the pandemic kind of made it so that he could get healthy.
Yeah.
But then they weren't playing great. They had, I think, I can't remember which game it was. Their second game, I think, in the bubble was really kind of like, all right, this could really be something special. And then they started playing bad, and then Simmons got hurt, and then it was kind of just like, it was so close to the playoffs. Whereas with Kyrie, he had been shut down, I think, like a month before the playoffs or 2 weeks before. Like it was, and they didn't have Hayward the whole season, so like the whole season's expectations were different. So the Celtics were kind of playing with house money at that point, whereas the Sixers, I think, still. I mean, it was like last year with the Celtics. After Game 1 versus the Bucks, I was like really shocked. I was like, I can't believe they just walloped the Bucks. I thought they were going to get smoked. But then you saw it with them after losing Game 2, and it's just like it just spiraled from there. They don't have good DNA. The Sixers team. It does feel a little bit like last year's Celtics teams in terms of just like the vibe around them. Whereas that Hospital Celtics team always had positive vibes, even with the players hurt. There was no negativity in the locker room like there is with the Sixers.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a
I
good
think
point.
it's a big mentality thing. You mentioned it earlier. I was going to ask you how they perform with Simmons, but you already told me you thought that there wouldn't have been much of a difference. So let me change up that question a little bit. Do you think the biggest issue in this series is Tobias Harris, or would you put more blame on like Brett Brown and his whole game plan?
I think it's Elton Brand's fault for constructing the roster the way it is, but
Okay.
be that what it may, I think Tobias is, if you look at the numbers, he's much more efficient when he's not on the court with Joe. He's more of he's like a poor man's what Carmelo used to be, like just a bucket getter, not like pure 3-point shooter, but kind of just needs to be the alpha of the offense and just go get buckets. He was never as good as Carmelo was in his prime, but that's just like his style of play, and that doesn't really fit with the prime Shaq, Joel Embiid. That's his style where he just like, give me the ball, I'm gonna go score, or we're gonna run it through me. Tobias kind of thrived in those bench units, either with Ben or with just other bench guys, and not with Joel, where he can kind of monopolize the ball more. And so it's just not ideal to not. And again, in the playoffs, that was always going to be the case. Regardless of whether Simmons got hurt or not, Tobias was going to be playing 99% of his minutes with Joel Embiid because Joel Embiid was going to be playing that many minutes. So it just kind of a crappy situation, but he's also playing bad. Also, the Celtics are defending him really well. I mean, I saw that, on NBA.com, he's 3 for 10 on layups in this series. And so I was like, I'm skeptical of that. Like, I know he's played bad, but that's egregious. And I looked it up, and a lot of them are like tip-ins that he missed.
Yeah.
But then, like, I think 3 of them got blocked. So the Celtics are not making it easy for him. And if he doesn't get into a rhythm, he'll keep shooting, but he'll keep missing. So that's the thing about Tobias. He's consistently around 18 to 21 points. At least he was for the most of the season. But the field goal percentage was not consistent. Sometimes he was taking a lot more shots than he should have to get to those points. So, again, he's a good third or fourth option. he's paid like a number one option, but that was just the market. It's just not a good setup. So I blame Elton Brand for the whole thing. I'm not going to put it all on Tobias. I just think that the Sixers just aren't as good as the Celtics.
It's definitely tough. Sam, what do you think about Tobias? Do you think it's his contract is bad and he's still a good player, or do you think it's his fault? Like, what are your thoughts on Tobias Harris?
I mean, I think the contract's really. I don't know how you decided to keep him instead of Jimmy Butler. I don't know. I don't understand that thought process from Elton Brand. But yeah, I mean, like he's a solid player, but just not for that much money. It's the same with Al Horford, unfortunately. Like I still really like Al Horford, but like he's making way too much money.
Yeah, the Horford one I think is much worse than the Tobias one. Like, granted, you're right about Tobias. That was too much money to give him. But I don't know if it was a choice between Tobias and Butler.
Yeah.
I think Butler kind of wanted to leave, and there was friction in the locker room that didn't really get publicized, which is surprising. And I always felt like Butler coming back would have meant they're going to have to trade Simmons because, the Sixers with that team last year were much better with Butler being the alpha on offense and just playing the two-man game with Joe. And Ben was absolutely worthless in the corner. Unless they're in transition on offense, he's just a non-factor, which is not really great for your max, young superstar player. Granted, his defense is absolutely elite, first team all defense, Ben Simmons, but and that's I think really where his injury is impacting the Sixers the most. But the Al Horford one, to me, like when it happened, I kind of was like, okay, great, sweet. Now we don't have to face him.
Right.
But it never made sense. It was such a stupid decision. Joel Embiid in that Toronto series last year was like better than Prime Shaq. He was like Bill Russell. He was like the best center that you could name in that Toronto series. When he was on the court, they're like plus 107. In the few minutes that he was off the court, they're like minus 90. So they're like, I understand that you need to get a backup who can play those few minutes, but you don't give a max contract to that guy. Like, that was so stupid. And it was like, you just have to have shooting on that team. And they got less shooting. And they're like, yeah, Al Horford's a good shooter for a big, but that's different than being a good shooter. That's not a JJ Redick stretch the floor, always be a threat, have gravity type of shooter, because you could leave Al on the perimeter and if he's only hitting 3 of 10, you'll take it.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing I don't understand is why they let JJ walk. He was great.
That was
he was
tough.
Great there.
They had to with Al to get out. I mean, it really
that makes it even worse, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have to go back and look at all the moves that they needed to make, but it was pretty much because of, to re-sign Tobias and to sign Al, they couldn't bring JJ back, which pretty crazy because I mean, especially him and Joel Embiid, they had such a good chemistry with the dribble handoffs.
Yeah,
it's really good to have like a veteran like JJ on the team. Like he's before this year, he made the playoffs every year in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Al Horford's actually done the same, but like like he was already there. You already know he fits. Like, why if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, but Al also has this reputation as being some like elite Hall of Fame leader. And Al is a solid person, a great guy, but he's not the kind of like locker room stabilizer guy. He's just doing his thing. He's not going to ruffle feathers, but he's not going to unruffle them either. Like, that's just not in his character. And because he's just kind of solid and coaches love him and he's really, really smart on the court, people have just labeled him as this like great leader. And it's just not his, like, what happened last year then?
Yeah, exactly.
No one ever talks about that. Like, Al wasn't the problem, but he for sure wasn't anything close to a solution. So I think a lot of like the quotes coming out of Philly when they signed him, like, oh, he needs leadership in the locker room, it'll help, blah, blah. No, it won't. Like that, like, just do research better. I mean, the Sixers just are terrible at looking into things. Drafting Markelle Fultz without like doing any sort of like background checks on, well, there's a chance. I mean, granted, that's such a fluke situation. I can't really kill them too hard for that, but clearly the Celtics saw something, and I'm sure a lot of it was that they just saw some pretty outlier potential in this kid Jason Tatum, but I'm sure they also saw some red flags with Fultz, and for some reason nobody else did.
Yeah. Now I mean, you kind of get to enjoy Jason Tatum, but does it hurt you that like they didn't pick him and they traded the Celtics like more stuff to not pick him?
No, absolutely not. Because that was not. Look, Jason Tatum could never have been on the Sixers. Like that's a myth that we need to bust right now. Because Danny Ainge was always going to draft Jason Tatum. They had the first pick. He would not have traded the first pick if he thought that there was a single chance that the Sixers would have taken Jason Tatum. Like he just wouldn't have done it. He would have just taken Tatum at one, and that's we it's revisionist history. And look, Scal on the broadcast every game is saying that, and it's so frustrating. It's like, dude, it's just not true. Like Danny would not have let that happen, and
Yeah.
and also you have to go back to that time. It like we didn't even know who the Celtics were targeting at 3. So it's not like Jason Tatum would ever have crossed the Sixers' mind at 1. Like it just like give Danny credit for being like so much smarter than everyone else, but there's just no world. Like people have been arguing with me about this on Twitter. Like, well, couldn't the Sixers have just lied? Couldn't they have said they weren't going to trade him? Like, yes, and I could have become a boxer. And even though I hate fighting, I hate violence. I'm bad at fighting, and I have a really breakable nose. Yes, in theory, I could have become a boxer, but I was never going to. So the Sixers, in theory, could have taken Jason Tatum, but it was just never going to happen. So, but so I have never felt that way about Jason Tatum. I just enjoy him on the Celtics because look, it's my job to cover this team, and I really like when they're good. I root for them. I am emotionally invested in the outcomes of the games. It's rare that they, I guess it's not as rare now because now it's the second time 3 years that they played the Sixers in the playoffs. But again, this doesn't hurt really for me because if you ask me who I wanted to win, like for me personally, it would be the Celtics because it's better for my life, for my
Yeah.
job. The kid inside me and like the team I'll always want to win championships is the Sixers, and Joel Embiid's my favorite player, but it doesn't really matter. I think I'm really loving watching Tatum's growth and Jaylen as well. It's just been you know it's been a blessing to be able to watch these guys and to hopefully soon in the next couple months have Tatum locked up long term like Jaylen as well.
I think Jaylen doesn't get enough talk, really. I think
For
he's
sure.
been the best, not surprised, but he's been maybe the
Consistency.
most impressive, consistent guy throughout this whole bubble. Like Tatum, since he cut his hair, has been mostly consistent, but like Brown he's just been so concrete and reliable that it's unreal.
And it's inspirational too. Like it really is because him finishing so well, because remember he was so bad his rookie year and even his second year at finishing and not consistent last year, and just the fact that he went into the summer and really addressed his touch and his finishing at the rim is just such it's like you tell your kids stuff like that. Like, look at this kid who was bad at something and just spent his summers working on it and got better. Like his finishing with his left hand is it's still no, now to the point it really I do expect them to go in, but for the first half or 3/4 of the season, I was like, I'm still waiting for Jaylen to come back to earth and start missing these layups that he's always missed. But he's just better now. He's better, and it honestly, as a Sixers fan, it makes me even more pissed off that Ben Simmons is still a terrible free throw shooter and still terrible at shooting in general and won't shoot, because I see someone like Jaylen Brown who just attacked his flaws and made them strengths, and it's just proof that if you work at something, you can get better, and there's just no excuse not to get better.
Not only that, but he, coming into the league, it was known that one of his weaknesses was shooting, and now it's to the point where he takes a three. I think it's going in every time.
Yeah.
Especially in the corners. But after the draft, when they picked him, I was listening to, I can't remember if it was a radio interview or a podcast, but Danny was on talking about Jaylen, and someone asked him about the shooting, and he says, "Look, we follow these guys from when they start to appear on the national scene, sometimes when they're in 8th grade." And he's like, we've never been worried about his shooting. He had a bad shooting year in college, but we think that he's, he can be a fine shooter. Now, granted, I don't know if that meant they think he's going to be like Klay Thompson lethal
Yeah.
shooter like he is sometimes. But that's a credit again to Danny and that front office doing the work and scouting, and also the kid himself. Like, look at who they pick. They pick the Marcus Smarts, they pick the Jaylen Browns, the Jason Tatums. These guys that just are good, high quality character guys, and especially someone like Tatum, who just he reminds me a little bit of Klay Thompson in the fact that I can't see Tatum just popping bottles out in clubs and stuff. I can see him just wanting to get better at basketball and just chill with his son. He just seems like a very simple. Doesn't need like even he's in like commercials and stuff, but like it never comes off as like star like diva type guy who's just trying to get famous. He's just trying to get really good at basketball, and I think Jalen's the same way.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
funny
hey,
thing, you mentioned the commercials, like, I think of the Rakuten commercial where he's just, like,
yep.
shopping and, like, he's on the computer, like, it's the most laid back thing, like, he's not leaving his house, he's literally online shopping.
Right, he's not like pulling up in like a sick car with shiny rims and trying to sell. Like, no, he's just
He's
drinking
at
a
the
coffee
coffee
in a
shop.
coffee shop.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, Klay Thompson gets down in China, so you never know what goes on over there. So
Yeah,
you
I
never
know.
know if
Maybe
he's popping
maybe that's
bottles.
not a good example, but
I'm kidding.
I just
I'm kidding.
remember when the Warriors first started winning championships, Mark Jackson was on one of the calls, and he said that Clay and Steph both just would rather just like they don't go out and party and stuff. They like just chill at home with their dog or whatever and play video games.
Yeah,
And that's what the difference is that they don't care about that other stuff. They just care about their craft and just hanging out.
and I love that mentality because I feel like you said, like most of the Celtics roster this year, especially, is like that. They just want to put their head down and get better. But you mentioned this earlier about talking about Brett Brown and the whole front office of the Sixers. What goes through your head if Brett Brown is still the coach next year?
He won't be. He can't be. It's an impossibility. But look, I honestly Brett is Brett. I'm not going to put too much of the blame on him. I think he's outmatched when it's against Brad Stevens because Brad is,
I agree.
I think a top 5 coach in the NBA. And once he gets a title, I think Brad will go up there. And Pop will probably be retiring. So I think Brad will be like the best coach in the NBA soon, or at least there's a chance. But I think really it's they have to change coaches because if you're not winning, if you're not reaching your goals and your expectations, even if it's not really the coach's fault, you kind of just have to. And at this point, when your second best player, a star signed to a max contract, is like just publicly insubordinate. When Brett Brown says, "I want to see," to the media in front of a microphone on camera where everyone can see it, says, "I want Ben to average a 3 a game," and that's literally the last 3 he shoots in the season, or that's the last time he even shoots a 3. He just literally 0 attempts since then. That's a problem. That means that there's a disconnect there, and that how do you think the rest of the players are going to react if Ben's just publicly humiliating the coach like that, who's they suppose they have a great relationship because they knew each other in Australia, but uh, you know, I think it's time for Brett to go. But my hope is that they get like a real GM, a real front office in there, um, because it's just look, it's bad in Philly. The roster is really screwed up, and it doesn't seem fixable. But look, if Daryl Morey has taught us anything, it's that you can do anything if you are smart enough. And he's reworked his roster around James Harden several times when we all thought they were stuck. And I think they'll eventually pay for that, but they're just trying to win now. And I think that's the mentality that the Sixers need to have. Um, with Joel Embiid, 26 years old, Ben Simmons, 24. You got to build around them. Don't trade them. Maybe eventually it'll turn out that you just can't build a team around those two, and you have to trade one of them. But
Yeah.
I think that it's just way too early to split. I mean, that'll be like a classic. We'll look back on that move and just pan the organization for years if they do that. But
Uh-huh.
I think that you got to get somebody that is like one has. If they don't have experience, then they better have some real good ideas, like a
Yeah.
like a Hinkie type, but not in terms of like building a team from scratch. But like Hinkie was a Daryl Morey disciple, like a guy that like, look, we need to think of other ways to accomplish our goals. And look, you could say what you want about tanking, but it worked. It worked for Philly. They got 2 stars. We'll never know. I mean, Hinkie could have been a terrible GM when it came to trying to build a winning team, but when it came to building a team and just getting an unreal amount of like high value assets and then getting star players in the draft, you cannot argue with the results of that. So they got to look for someone like that. I don't know if they will, but in fact, if I'm being honest, I don't think they will. I think they'll fire Brett and be like, "That's it. We'll just get Jason Kidd as our coach, and everything will be better."
Oh man, something I saw
Hold on.
listening to. You want to go?
Sorry, Jack. It's funny you mentioned, like Brett Brown saying he wants Simmons to shoot a 3 a game. I don't understand from the Simmons standpoint why that would ever be an issue. Like why you would ever want to challenge that, because he's encouraging you to get better. Like, isn't that what you should want from a coach?
Yeah,
Like,
you have the
you have a
freedom
weakness
to
in your
fail.
game, and he's encouraging you to be comfortable trying to improve it in a game.
Right. He's saying he doesn't care if it goes in or not. But it just shows you that there's something like a mental flaw in Ben's head. Like he's afraid of missing shots.
That
That's why.
infuriates me, and I'm not like a Sixers fan, or I don't even like Ben Simmons. But like,
Yeah.
if you have somebody that's truly like wanting you to get better, and they do not care, like they're trying to take the pressure off you and like do it the best way, and it's like you said, he's like humiliated him publicly. Like, how can you do that? Like that's just a different level.
Look, he's a weird guy. He's a weird kid. It's just like I like him. I've always felt like he was not long for the market, for the franchise. He's always had a flight risk vibe to him. I've always felt like he's going to try to go to like LA or New York or something. It just always felt like that, because he's the opposite of Tatum, where he's posting on Instagram his brand new Ferrari with his matching Jordans, and dating the Jenners and stuff like that. But which is fine. I have no problem with that if you're getting better. And what he's gotten better at is like some small little things that make him an elite defender. I'm sure he's getting smarter, basketball IQ wise, but just from experience. But he's not improved his shooting, his free throw shooting too. Like to me, it's like, if you're not going to shoot threes, fine. Like that's stupid and I hate it, but at least be a better free throw shooter. And that is not impossible. And I'm telling you, it's crazy, but he really does shoot with the wrong hand. And it's such a weird thing. Like if you watch him shoot, his form literally looks like he's right-handed, but just shooting with his left hand. And there was one game in the seeding round where it was like a beautiful sequence for Sixers fans. Like Embiid was making awesome plays, blocking shots, and Simmons was out in transition. He was out in transition, and like he normally does, he runs to the basket with a zero plan and just tries to react. And he's really good. So most of the time it works out, but he had no one to pass to. So he took the ball from his left hand and made a beautiful fingertip with his right hand. Like, what left-handed person does that? What left-handed person in midair takes the ball from his supposed shooting hand to his non-hand, while literally directly in front of the basket? So it wasn't like he was to the side and he needed to, and there was nobody around, and just flicks it up gracefully with his offhand. He's shooting with the wrong hand, and I don't know if you can, at this point, if it's too late to try to fix it. Either way, I mean, get with a shooting coach that isn't your brother, because that's what he does. His shooting coach is his brother. Get with someone that'll hold you accountable. I'm hesitant to say Drew Hanlon, because the Sixers had a bad experience with Markelle Fultz, but I think that was probably a Fultz thing, because Joel Embiid does Drew Hanlon. And I know Shemi and obviously Jason Tatum work with Drew Hanlon. So it's like, there's a pretty good track record there with that guy. Get someone like that and stop posting Instagram videos over the summer or in the off season of the select few jumpers that you made in your little scrimmages. Just work. Just work and get better, and become a better free throw shooter. And then your 3-shot will get better too.
He's just a weird dude overall, I think. I don't know. I saw something somewhere on a podcast I was listening to called Through the Wire, and one of the guys on there said Sam Hinkie started the process and trusted the process, and Elton Brand came in and rushed the process. He just wanted to get like as much talent around these two guys, Simmons and Embiid, as possible, which I agree with. I think is good and everything, but he did it at the expense of trading guys like JJ and Covington and Saric and everybody that Hinkie worked to get assets and get. And I think that in the end, like you were saying, Elton Brand, like the way he constructed this roster really killed any chance they wanted at competing now, at least. So
Right, and it
I think
was
it's tough.
supposedly to make them more formidable, like this season,
Yeah.
which is crazy because, like, well, who is the shooter? They're lucky that Furkan Korkmaz even came back. I mean,
Mhm.
because they made it so that he could only sign like a minimum deal, and he's just still did it. But he's just not good enough to play in, like, I mean, has he played really at all? I mean, he's played a little bit, but I haven't noticed him that much on the floor. But he's not JJ.
Yeah.
And you need to pay for guys like that. You need to go out and get guys. And they lucked out that that Golden State was trying to get under luxury tax, and they got Alec Burks with Glenn Robinson.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of Celtics fans have been complaining that Danny didn't do something like that, and it's really frustrating because it's like, look, they wanted to dump 2 players without taking any players back, and the Sixers had to cut 2 players. One of them, Trey Burke, is playing great for Dallas right now, and actually is a kind of player that the Sixers could really use at this point.
Ironic.
So yeah, it is ironic. There's a cost to everything. It's not NBA 2K, but the Sixers really screwed up last offseason. And the season before when they hired Elton Brand instead of a real GM.
Yeah, it's a rough look all around, I think, the way it's going. But to flip things kind of towards the Celtics as of now, one thing I wanted to touch on was we were talking about it a lot earlier, Jaylen Brown playing out of his mind. Also, sorry if I sound like a cartoon character. My nose is the most congested it's ever been. Jaylen Brown's been playing super, super well in the bubble. And a guy I had written down, I forget why exactly, but Chris Middleton's been playing awful in the 2 games against Orlando. And so Middleton was an all-star this season. Jaylen Brown wasn't. Do you put those guys on the same level, Max, or do you think Brown still has a little ways to go to be where Chris Middleton is?
No, I would put him on the same level. I think Jaylen, I think Jaylen has much higher potential than Middleton. I think Middleton is kind of miscast a little bit as a number 2, whereas I think that Jaylen's absolutely can fit the role as a number 2. He doesn't create, and Middleton does that better than he does. But Jaylen is just does whatever you ask him. He's a perfect player. He's so versatile. He can play where you want him to play. He can play how you want him to play. He just takes what comes to him. He doesn't have to have plays run for him. I think that Middleton's really good, especially when he's playing the Celtics. But so I don't want to like knock Middleton. But I think that that Jaylen's there. I would put him there right now. I think that I think Middleton gets a lot more credit because he's on the the Bucks.
Yeah.
He's on one of the best teams in the NBA, and Jaylen is kind of overshadowed by Jason Tatum, which is understandable. But I think he's right there. I mean, he's a little bit higher usage away from putting up the same numbers as Middleton. He's not as much of a playmaker, but he's not really asked to be anyway. But I think Jaylen's ceiling is a lot higher than where Middleton is right now.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I like Jaylen's game. I feel like they're both great defenders. I feel like Middleton gets a lot more credit, like you said, because he is on the number 1 seed in the East. But I was listening to a bunch of podcasts that I've been listening to recently, and they're all saying like Middleton, the way he's playing in the bubble at least, like I don't know if he can be this number 2 guy he's hyped up to be. So I tend to agree with you there. Sam, do you have any thoughts on Middleton or Brown or either of them together?
Well, earlier I said I really don't think Jaylen gets enough credit, and like this nails it on the head. What Max was saying, like because Middleton's on the Bucks, he gets more recognition, and of course Jason Tatum's absolutely balling out of his mind, so Jaylen Brown's getting overshadowed. So those are 2 things that definitely make it so Brown doesn't get the recognition he deserves. But like I think he should be an all-star next year for sure, and I really think he could have made it this year, but it's kind of tough competition. The top 4 teams in the East all had some pretty good representatives there. I wouldn't get too down on Middleton until they play the Celtics because he'll be back. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I tweeted out during one of the games. I was like, if Middleton played like this against Boston, the Celtics would never lose in the playoffs. I don't know where his head's at against Orlando, especially because it's the Magic. Maybe it's because he thinks they should be winning, but he just couldn't hit the side of a barn if he tried shooting the ball. So
it's funny you
Didn't
mentioned
that
the
happen
bubble.
last year? I'm sorry. Didn't that happen last year in the Toronto series? Didn't he play terrible? I can't remember. Let me look it up.
maybe I have no
could
idea.
not tell you.
It would make sense. It's just surprising me because it's against the Magic. Like I would think all pressure has to be off there. Like they should be winning that series. Granted, they lost game 1 for some reason, but they bounced back strong in game 2. So I don't know what's going through Middleton's head. That is just like, yeah, I just can't make a shot because he was missing them at the end, like garbage time too. Like he couldn't get anything going whatsoever the whole game. So I don't know
that's
what's
not
going
good.
on with him because they
Yeah.
need him.
Yeah. He played really bad. He in the finals last year, 13.7 points per game on 41% shooting. He still hit 37.5 from 3.
Yeah.
But that's not going to cut it.
Especially as a number 2. Definitely
Right.
not as a number 2. So they need him to be that number 2 guy if they want a chance this year. And the way they played in that first game had me scared for them, especially with Middleton. But moving on to a little bit more about the Celtics, someone I've seen come in the game a lot for Brad, Grant Williams, kind of provides like some sort of energy or spark plug that you can just tell the mood of the Celtics goes up. What do you think it is about Grant Williams that like brings that intensity to the floor when the Celtics need it?
Oh, he's just like a big Marcus Smart. He just does, all those little things. He generally makes the right decision. He's a really nice, good teammate, great guy. And he's an elite screen setter. He just is, he erases players, but just standing in front of them. And I think that within time, he's going to be a real weapon for the Celtics in their rotation. I think now he still needs to improve his perimeter shots, which have looked good so far. But I think for once that becomes, and I believe in him, I believe he's the kind of guy, just like we're saying with Jaylen and Jason, where he'll put in the work, he'll get better at what he needs to get better at. And I think once he becomes like a real consistent 3-point shooter, it's going to open up his inside game more because he's just too undersized right now. And that's where he lived in college. He was able to just, because he's so strong, just get by college defenders and just bully them. And he can't do that in the NBA, at least not at this point. So I think once he becomes a perimeter shooter, like a real threat, it's going to open up his game and he's going to be even more of an asset to the Celtics.
Yeah, the dogs in my dad's house are freaking out right now, so I'm not sure what they're doing. But I love Grant for the reason that you're saying. Sam, what do you think?
I completely agree with the Marcus Smart comparison. Like he's a big Marcus Smart. That's kind of what I've been going with, and I mean like that's not like a unique take. Like I'm not trying to say like I invented that, but like it's definitely like probably the best comparison you can get because he might not show up in the box score, but like he made an impact. Like in game 1, the tie game in the 4th, he comes in and he gets 2 big offensive rebounds, I want to say, on the same possession. I love Grant.
Yeah.
He works hard. He's gotten better at shooting. I mean, he just struggled to start the season, but they're not able to sag off him like they can for Tice, even though they shouldn't sag off Tice either. Tice is no slouch. But yeah, I really am happy that Grant's on the team. Everyone seems to get along with him, which is great. And I'm happy he's getting minutes because he's definitely a hard worker.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Hayward minutes, like I thought Shemi was going to be.
I did too.
The more of the Hayward replacement, but Brad, to his credit, he went with a lot of different guys. Mm-hmm. Romeo played 23 minutes, and Wanamaker's minutes went up, and he played great. And then Grant. So I mean, it didn't help with my my picking Shemi Ojeleye in my DraftKings, but that's fine. It was only $2.
Yeah, I love Shemi. I hope he can, get more rotation minutes. I think if he improves his 3-point shooting even more, it's been steadily improving. But if he can get it going a little more, he'll be a real piece, or another weapon for the Celtics to work with. But speaking of weapons, we've seen a little bit of rotation at the center position. Cantor and Robert Williams specifically. especially in game one. It was very noticeable when Joel left the game. Brad Stevens brought in Williams, and then vice versa, and the whole rotation. Both of them have been playing solid in the bubble. Obviously, Williams is younger, so for the future, you'd probably look to him. But right now, Max, who are you choosing? Like, who do you think's playing at a level above the other, or do you think it's even?
I think Cantor, just because he's just a little bit more disciplined on defense. I know that's crazy. He's not known as a defender, but Time Lord, just his issue is he just bites on pump fakes so much, and he's always done that with the Celtics. And that's something that he can learn and get better at, but you can't really practice it. It's more of a just give him more minutes, and that's the one thing he didn't get this year because of his injuries. But uh, he really has surprised me. I did not expect him to even play really in the bubble. I thought just it's a lost season for him. But the quarantine helped with him getting healthy, and to Brad's credit, he saw something either in practice or whatever, and was just like, look, we got to get him in some more minutes. And he didn't play as much last game because I think the Sixers did a better job of kind of exposing that, getting him in foul trouble a little bit. But he's a good passer. He's an elite shot blocker. And he took a 3 the other night. So it really the sky's the limit for him, and he's been I didn't think he'd play a single minute in the playoffs. So the fact that he's played at all is a real surprise to me and a credit to him. And I think Brad's just going to play matchups, and that's what Brad does. He's got this photographic memory, so he can remember all the moments that guys did well or did bad, and kind of go with his gut and see what he thinks will work in that situation that he's in. So don't be surprised if Time Lord plays 20 minutes tonight or next game instead of Ennis getting all those minutes. But I would still, if it were me, lean Ennis just because he's just got a little bit more experience, and Ennis is he really impressed me last year with the Trailblazers, just gutting through that shoulder injury, while facing free agency. So I think Ennis is a good teammate, and he'll work his butt off to do whatever the team asks.
He just seems like a great dude. And didn't he make a 3 to start the game the other day too? Like what the hell was that?
He kind of kick-started the run the other day. Like shot clock winding down. He was like, "Well, shit, I guess I'll take it," and then didn't even hit the rim.
It was our John Stewart drain of the game in post game live. Was his Cantor 3.
So weird.
It's crazy. That was his 4th career playoff 3.
Oh my god.
And one of my coworkers, Mark, put out a tweet that showed all of the Celtics that now have more made 3s in the playoffs than Ben Simmons, and his Cantor's on it.
Oh my god.
Shemi, everyone you can think of.
That's crazy. That's just. It just speaks volumes, I guess. We don't have to talk about Ben Simmons anymore. I think we've ragged on him enough, but it does speak volumes as to what he's willing to do for the team. And I agree with Cantor on the Blazers last year. Him playing through that injury and he just looked like a workhorse every game, especially with Nurkic out. It was great. It was great to see, and I'm glad he's a Celtic now. But looking forward a little bit, obviously Gordon Hayward went down with a grade 3 ankle sprain, which is devastating for the Celtics team. Do you think that's going to impact the Celtics' chance against Toronto, or obviously it will impact it a lot? But do you think the Celtics should be able to get by Toronto still, Max?
I do, but it's going to be much harder. I mean, the Celtics have played really well against the Raptors this season in every game except the one after the Christmas Day game, where it was kind of like the Raptors getting revenge for the Celtics embarrassing them on Christmas on their home court. But otherwise, they've been just great. Jaylen has played his best basketball versus the Raptors this year. There's just something about that matchup that the Celtics, can take advantage of. And, Gordon also has good numbers versus Toronto, so maybe he was the key, and that they're in a lot of trouble. But I think that it's going to be a great series, and I don't think that Hayward being out means that the Celtics can't beat the Raptors. I still think that they should be able to, because they do a good job on Siakam, which is key. And and they just have weapons. The Celtics, you can't really look at the Sixers trying to take Tatum out, which is hilarious because he scored 30 plus in both games. But they're clearly trying to make it hard for Tatum. But the Celtics just can come. We haven't even mentioned the name Kemba Walker, who was supposed to be their best player this season, and now you could argue that he's their third. But and Kemba's great. Scored 22 points last game. Cardiac
No one
Kemba in the
talks about it either.
playoffs. Right, and he,
which is fine. No one talk about it. He'll surprise whoever they play.
exactly. So you know what? I still think the Celtics should be favored in that series if that's what ends up happening, which it will.
I'm excited to watch it. Sam, what do you think about Boston versus Toronto?
I mean, you could say this about the Sixers as well. Vice versa, though. The Celtics really played well against Toronto in the regular season. 3-1. They only lost one game at the Garden. I mean, there's definitely some things to be excited about. I mean, they have played well against Toronto, like you say, Max. We saw it in the bubble. So you have recent data, I guess. You have something to go off of. And it's just exciting because they have this Raptors, the only team the Celtics haven't played ever in the playoffs in the East, and we could see a really good series between the two. I do think the Celtics should win, but I'll tell you they're going to beat any team, to be honest. So
a little bit of bias, always going to have some bias there.
But I might be the most biased person.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, Max, before Sam gets into his end of the show questions he is always asking, but who were your picks to come out of each conference, or even in the conference finals at the before the season even started? I'm talking way back in October versus right now. We've had obviously the season shut down. Now we're in the bubble. What's the difference? The huge difference between your beginning of the season picks and right now?
Well, I don't know if I officially made any picks, but I for sure thought the Sixers.
As did I.
Chance. Yeah, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. And I was incredibly wrong. But, it was one of those things hey, if this works, they're going to be unbeatable. I just thought their defense was going to be, when people were talking about them possibly having, the best defense in the NBA this season, I remember just thinking, you're not giving them enough credit. I think they could have one of the best defenses ever with the lineups that they can throw out there. And it just, they were good, but they just weren't as good as I thought they were going to be. So that's where I was wrong about the East. And, I was kind of just whatever with the Celtics. It was I think, I don't think they have a chance to make the finals, but I think that they can make the conference finals, with this roster because of, Jaylen and Tatum, and you're getting Kemba to replace, that name we will not name, other point guard that used to be here.
I thought you were going to call him a prick, outright. I thought you were going to be that prick, Kyrie.
That human being who I do not enjoy thinking about or seeing or hearing, especially hearing.
A genius.
Right, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
An actual genius when it comes to this game. But and then in the West, it was kind of, I was really liking the Clippers, and just with getting Paul George and Kawhi. To add to that team that already had some plucky players, and Doc. And I was not sold on the Lakers just because, I just thought they were too thin. But, who knows? I think that the Rockets have played a lot better than I thought that they would. Denver I don't believe in really because I just don't think Jamal Murray's good enough, although he played great. I can't remember if it was the playoffs or one of their bubble games. I think it was the first playoff game.
Against Utah, yeah.
Yeah, he played really well. I don't believe in Utah at all. But, because just Rudy Gobert is just something soft about him. Yeah. And he's not really playable towards the end of playoff games. But, that's basically where I stand on the West. I don't know if the Clippers are the team now, but, we'll see.
Sam, any big differences between your picks or thoughts at the beginning of the season until now, aside from the Sixers, which I think is everybody's big?
I was really sold on the Sixers, man.
Yeah.
I really thought Al Horford was going to be good there because I was well, he really plays his best at the 4. He can play the 4 then B, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But obviously it didn't work out. The Celtics are definitely better than I thought they were going to be. For sure. But that's definitely a tribute to Tatum and Brown, becoming... Well, Tatum for sure, Brown arguably better than Kemba. And that was the take early on, is if Tatum becomes the best player on the team, which he has, Celtics are scary, and they certainly are. So there's that. And I still really like the Clippers. I just think they're really well equipped to take on the Lakers. And my bias also wants to speak the Lakers not being good into existence. So there's that.
100%. 100%. Screw the Lakers.
But yeah, I would have to agree. I think I was really scared of the Sixers, especially that like death lineup they put out that was super long, super tall, all that. I think a lot of us thought it would be a big problem, especially for the Celtics. So
Not only that, but I always, well, Max, you touched on this. The Sixers were excited. Oh, we don't have to face Al Horford anymore.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
I
it
always
was
thought
really-
Al Horford was the key to beating the Sixers, and he was gone. And I was like, well, now they don't have him, so it kind of sucks.
Yeah, you just don't foul and beat. That's what Al was really good at.
oh man. But yeah, Sam, do you want to get into your end of show questions? Maybe you could gear them more towards Sixers
Sure.
or whatever
Yeah.
you want to do. I'll let it up to
Okay,
you.
Max. So usually towards the end of our shows, I will ask our guests about different things they have. So, do you have a favorite piece of Celtics or Sixers memorabilia, like a jersey, autograph, picture, whatever that you have, and why? What's the story behind it?
I have a couple Iverson jerseys that I love because it's why I fell in love with the game of basketball with Allen Iverson. He's the reason. He is the answer to why I love basketball. To be clever, but as far as Celtics stuff, I have a Tommy Heinsohn bobblehead that I love. A couple Celtics hats actually, and I just got myself a custom made. I made it myself. Time Lord poster. I stole the idea from a Sean Kemp poster from the '90s, and just made it myself and got it printed, which was a pain because Staples won't do it because it's illegal because they're making money off it. So I had to go through some hoops, so I can't sell it or anything like that. But it's a nice little addition to Studio B, and B stands for basement.
That's awesome. So, I mean, you don't get to go to the Garden. You're usually in the studio, if I'm not mistaken. So, do you have a favorite game that you've been a part of covering, or anything like that? Or if you have been in the Garden for anything crazy, what's your favorite memory there?
No. So you're right. I'm usually in the studio. I was actually at the Garden in the truck for not this season, the season before, the overtime win versus Kawhi and the Raptors. I think it was in November.
That was a good game. That was the Kyrie game where he made the shot from the parking lot.
Yeah, it was a great game to be there for. And I was actually in Philly for. I was working for the game that the Celtics won last season as well in Philly, where Hayward had 30.
Oh, he was unreal. Yeah.
Yeah, and just driving back up to Boston, listening to Philly talk radio was just, man, I missed those days of just brooding in our own doom on talk radio. But my favorite game to cover, easy, as soon as you had asked the question, I knew right off the top of my head. The December 30th Miami Heat game 3 seasons ago, or was it 4 seasons ago, with Isaiah Thomas.
50 points.
Yeah. When he hit that shot to give him 50 from the parking lot, it was the first time I made a noise in the control room of I couldn't control my body. I was like, whoa, we all did. And it was incredible. That run by Isaiah Thomas was magical. And that is what encapsulated it to me, because even as great as he was and as just the tragic hero in the playoffs, there was the tragedy that made it a little bit sadder. This was before that. This was kind of just when he was on that 20-point streak where he set the Celtics' new record of consecutive games with 20 points. He had just complained to Brad about not playing in the fourth quarter against the Warriors in early November, and he became the king of the fourth. And it was just a fun. It encapsulated that season for me. So that was my favorite game to be a part of.
Yeah, I still remember where I was for that game because, well, it's not hard because I usually watch from home and I wasn't home that day, so it was like an outlier. And so yeah, it's one of my favorite memories actually. And then you have the Mike Gorman got it, and then Tommy loses his mind. Oh, yeah. So that's a great call. And so one more thing I want to ask, because I kind of talked to you about this when the call dropped. Was so you are producing the game today. Can you let the listeners know what you're going to have to do today after you leave our show and what the process of getting set up is.
So I work on the pre and post game show and the halftime show. I'm not a part of the game broadcast. I sometimes do filling in the truck and stuff like that. But our whole Celtics group is one like family with the
Okay.
game broadcast and stuff. But I'm mostly studio pre and post game shows and all of our like trade deadline stuff. But so what I'll do is I'll get on a call with the producer and our other assistant producer, and we'll start, planning out the show. We have 5 block shows, and we'll start. We have a bunch of sponsored elements that we have to kind of, figure out what we're going to do for each things. Like we do like a telestrator type thing that's sponsored by Arbella, and we need to figure out what plays we're going to do for that. So I take ownership of that, and I help our editor, and I talk to Scal about what kind of plays he wants to go over. And then I'm really the guy that's doing the gambling stuff now. We have a new initiative to do our storyline segments, and I basically segment produce. I do like little pieces of the show, and my boss is the one who puts it all, into one big show. So that's what I basically do for pregame. I do the fantasy stuff and the betting, and then picking plays and just contributing to the ideation, which is a buzzword that people use now. But we're coming up with ideas for the show, and then I help build the stuff, the graphics and things like that. And then in the post game show, again, I'm all remote. This is all done from my basement.
Yeah, it's the craziest part.
It is a really cool setup. I'm actually really impressed at how they were able to pretty easily. All I had to do was get a company iPad that way I can talk to the people that are in the control room, just like I have my headset on there. And we have this little Zoom that we do so I can see the control room monitors, because that's a huge for post game to be able to see when the players start talking in their post game press conferences, and then I clip that off and play it. I'm actually the one or I put it in the spot where the director can push a button to play it. So I get that stuff ready, and then I put the name keys or the name like graphics. They're called lower thirds. And I know a lot of times, sometimes, not a lot of times, we'll put some funny ones on there, and people will clip them off and tweet them out, and that's fun. That's one of my favorite parts of the job. And then I fill out the scoreboard and stuff like that, and because post game kind of like produces itself, but really, we still have to make choices in terms of timing and what we want to talk about, but like the game decides a lot of that stuff.
Exactly.
So it's a lot of just like the in communication with Abby if she's asking questions for some of the players and stuff like that, and then and making sure that we're not missing anything. Like I had to listen to Embiid the other night. He talked for 8 minutes, and it's difficult when you're trying to listen to that, and you're also being asked questions in this other ear, and we're also trying to pay attention, make sure that you got all your there's no typos on any of the stuff you put on TV. So, but it's fun, and your heart's racing the whole time. It's adrenaline, and it's it's great, and it's crazy that I can do it from home. I still can't believe it.
And I have to ask this, and if you can't talk about it, it's completely okay. But the whole Abby situation is kind of baffling to me because, as a fan, and I always watch the NBC broadcast if I can, if the game's on there, because I love Mike and Tommy. I think you guys do a great job with pre and post game, of course. So Abby is supposed to be not back next season, and I don't really understand why. Like I do, like I know what's happening, but like, one, if you can, like, how do you feel about that? And two, do you know like if they have heard the cry to save Abby's job or not?
So I can't really talk about that. It's company
That's
stuff.
fine. Yeah, I understand.
But what I will say is that I love Abby. Abby's one of my best friends.
As do we.
And she, we came up together. I got promoted to AP when she got hired, and so we were both on the low end of the totem pole and got some of the worst shifts, but we worked them together. And she is just such a professional, and anytime anyone wants to ask me about Abby, I'll say that she's so good at her job, and I really do love her. She's a great friend, and that's pretty much all I can say.
Yeah, that's fair. I know the company, everything. I didn't want to have you say anything, but I was just curious. But yeah, Jack, you can start the outro, and I will finish it.
Thank you so much, Max, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I was such a mess today. For those of you guys listening, my call dropped and then my microphone cut out. So if you hear me coughing and sniffling, I very much apologize. I was a little bit of a mess. But
Jack's a warrior. He's
oh
broadcasting through coronavirus.
But yeah, you better be wearing a mask and socially distancing.
Yeah, totally. From my remote location where no one else is around, of course. But seriously, though, Max, we really do appreciate you coming on the show to talk about the series and everything. So, is there anything you want to say before we cut this off? Tell people where to follow you on Twitter, all stuff like that.
Yeah, find me at Max_Lederman, Lederman. And watch NBC Sports Boston whenever you get a chance. We're the locals. We got the insight. If it's a simulcast with the national network, you don't want the national perspective.
That's right. I never watch on I really hate ESPN broadcasts or TNT compared to NBC. I wish you guys could do it for the whole playoffs. I really do.
Oh yeah,
100% too.
100%. My brother put on the ESPN by accident, and I yelled at him. But I always got to watch NBC. I always got to listen to the right guys talk. But yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at BannerTownJack. Make sure to give Max a follow, and I'll throw it over to Sam for the rest of the outro.
Okay. Game is at 6:30 today. Celtics will be looking to go up 3-0. Max, thank you very much for coming on again. It was a great show. We had a good time. When this series is eventually over, I will be putting out a Weird Celtics recap. It is going to be something special. I'm already working on it. Be on the lookout for that, Max. I'll make sure you get to see that as part of Weird Celtics Twitter. And you can follow me at Sam LaFran at Bannertown Sam. I'm sorry. And follow the podcast _ From the Rafters. That's the show. Bye.